Welcome to Culture Talk. This is the segment where we talk about everything from books and films to things you're going to see on social media. And the purpose is to really help you engage in conversation and use these topics to share your faith. I'm joined today with my friend and colleague, biochemist Fuz Rana. We're going to be talking about when bad memes happen to good Christians. And we have a specific tie-in. You know, I don't know if you've seen things like this online, but a sweet woman who I love very much, she recently shared a thing where she's not ashamed to have Jesus on her wall. Unfortunately, the picture she shared was of Obi-Wan, and that kind of has happened before, and it's not shared ironically. So another common thing, I mean, that's obviously an error, but some things aren't very obvious, and some of those things, well, one of them in particular is the laminin protein. So before we dive into the arguments, can you tell us first what is the laminin protein?
Yeah, well, laminin is actually a very important protein that plays a role in maintaining the structural integrity of tissues in our body. And tissues are comprised of cells that then secrete materials to form this very thin sheet called the extracellular matrix. And that sheet is made up of proteins and polysaccharides that interact to form this meshwork. And that meshwork anchors the cells to the extracellular matrix and even helps to hold cells together with respect to one another. So laminin is helping to hold our bodies together.
Okay, so then let's talk about the shape of laminin, because when we think of laminin holding things together and now the shape, that's where we get into the potentially tricky area. That's
right. Well, laminin is a T-shaped molecule, and in fact, it has a number of binding sites along the arms, along the four arms, that are used for it to interact with these other materials that are part of the extracellular matrix and to interact with cells. But because it has a T shape, and because it's helping to hold things together, there's a fairly well-known Christian pastor who's pointed out, well, this is scientific support for Colossians 1, 15 to 17, that says Jesus holds everything together. So the idea that if there are these little crosses in our tissues that are holding us together, well then that's proof that Jesus must be holding us together.
Right. And that's such a beautiful idea, but is it scientifically accurate?
No, it's really a very bad argument. First of all, laminin, the T shape that we see, for example, if you look it up online, is what biochemists call an idealized structure, which means it's just a way to represent the molecule so that biochemists can make out critical structural details that help them understand how the molecule behaves. In fact, the arms are really very floppy, and this is actually necessary for laminin to play its role in binding other materials together and holding things together. It has to be able to undergo contortions. Well, the most common shape for laminin in tissues is probably that of a swastika, not a cross. So it's really not a good argument.
Yeah, so that's not something that we want to be supporting, that we have little swastikas all inside of us that hold us together.
No, not at all. We don't want to do that.
So then when we see something like that, someone that we know is a Christian and they are well-meaning, and that's something that we want to remember, that they're well-meaning, but how do we then have a conversation? Maybe that's offline, or what does that look like? Because we want to, of course, maintain that relationship, but we also want to help non-Christians see that we are able to kind of challenge things gently. And so what would you recommend?
In my experience, Christians are really very much concerned with truth, and they want to get things right. So if you approach it that way, with gentleness, but with some firmness, I think that helps. And as you mentioned, people are well-meaning and well-intentioned. And in my experience, if you take something away from somebody, it's really important to give them something in return, maybe even better. And there's loads of wonderful, very powerful arguments for God's existence and that can be used to build a bridge to the gospel from biochemistry. And so we're better off teaching people to use those good arguments as opposed to this argument that isn't the best.
Right. Well, thank you. That's a really good point. Take away something, give something back. That's very helpful. Thank you so much for that, Fuz. If you want to hear more from Dr. Fuz Rana, check out reasons.org, and you can search for laminin to find more on this topic.